The man on piano right there, Bob James, with a group that I guess you guys had not played together, all of you. You had played with each of the members of this group in the past, but never all together.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it until we picked them up at the airport, and they were introducing themselves to each other, and I was kind of surprised that they didn't really know each other. But immediately I started feeling really good about it because it had that aspect of new conversation, a kind of fresh, getting to know each other vibe that actually contributed in a big way to our concert.
And yeah, I guess that, jazz has a lot of that sense of risk. I always say you can never succeed unless you risk failure.
Sure. and even the failure moments are sometimes the most fun because I've said to people many times, I've used the phrase, I meant that. When that real sour note comes out, there have been a lot of other people like Thelonious Monk who made a whole career out of wrong notes.
Yeah.
So it's,
I think that's a Ben Sidran line. He's like, that's where jazz comes from. Somebody goofed. And you just go with it. And,
sure. And then you say, okay, I wonder if the audience knew that. How can I play my next notes to make them seem like they went along with that sour one?
So tell us a little bit about this group. This is, I have to say, we had this CD in rotation for a few months, and it does not sound like a group that had just come together. You guys, sound really together.
It didn't feel like it either, and partially because I knew all three of the guys separately pretty well, with the little bit exception of Nate Phillips, who I had only worked with him once before. But certainly Perry Hughes, the guitar player, and I are long time friends, going back to the 1980s at least, and feel very, very comfortable with him on stage, and he's a great supporting guy. Even if he hadn't rehearsed me, or if I was pulling out a new arrangement for the first time, Perry would find something beautiful to play on it with no problem.
So you guys are really simpatico. So you guys really know each other.
Yeah. In fact, even the way I was set up on the stage, I wanted to be closer to him than usually the guitar player would be in the conventional quartet setting. I had him behind me like he was my anchor or my comfort zone person. Mm-hmm. My only problem with it was every time I had to give him a cue, I would get a neck ache from turning around, not being able to get to have him see me. But Perry and I are longtime friends, and I love giving him extra exposure too, because he definitely falls in that category of deserving of wider recognition. Yeah,
no, it's not a name that I'm familiar with, and certainly, it seems there's a lot of folks like that, a lot of folks who can really, really play, but have never, sort of been put forward as leaders,
He's a pretty shy guy in many ways, and never really went out on his own to establish the Perry Hughes group. He's always been a support person. In fact, when I first worked with him, it was a shock to me because Earl Klugh recommended him, and I had just collaborated with Earl Klugh on this album One-on-One, and we decided to go out on tour. And Earl said, well, I want to use Perry Hughes on guitar. And I thought, well, wait a minute, don't you play the guitar, Earl? Do we really need the budget to pay for another guitar player? Because our music fundamentally on our album didn't really require that extra person. But what I didn't know at the time was that Perry and Earl were really, really good friends, and Perry is just this super supportive guy that makes a major contribution no matter what the music is. And even at that time when we toured back in the 1980s, I can still remember feeding off of his amazing grooves and learning from him, his patience and his relaxed way of playing.
We're here with Bob James and also Jeff Haas, who is going to be joining Bob this Saturday night on the stage of the Milliken Auditorium for kind of a different presentation. And you guys are going to be taping your IPR show there.
We are. We're going to tape about an hour and a half interview, and then edit it for for the IPR show, The New Jazz Archive.
So how long is the New Jazz Archive usually runs? An hour?
59 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what? How are you going to do this? Like, you're on stage. Is Bob going to be at a piano, or how are we going to?
We're going to have some musical surprises.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. There will be a piano.
Okay.
A special piano, in fact, Bob's piano.
Oh, it's a piano that you're used to.
Yes, over many, many years, I've been very happy to have that piano live in the Milliken Auditorium. I didn't have room for it in my house. I acquired that way back in the 1980s also, and I love the piano and love having the opportunity to play it.
And it has a good home.
Right, it definitely has a good home.
Yep, and many jazz notables have played it thanks to Bob's generosity of loaning it to Milliken. And in fact, Gene Gentleman, the director of the music, told us this morning that Monty Alexander actually called and left a message on his answering machine after the gig at Milliken saying, "I want to come back and play that piano again."
Oh, well, me too. I want. So give him my encouragement.
So it's going to be a unique opportunity for me and for our community to engage Bob in conversation about his rich history, his early beginnings in music and classical music and in jazz. Talk a lot about Bob's history in the music, and then ask him to play some tunes. Then we'll bring Gene out and talk about the unique development of this CD. Were it not for Gene and Bob's longtime friendship, Gene might be in jail now, in as much as he didn't have permission to record the
proceedings.
And Gene, you can speak to this better than I, but my understanding is that Bob, after the concert, said to you, "I wish we had recorded this. It was such a special evening."
Well, I walked into Bob's dressing room after the concert, and I knew something magic had happened that evening on the stage. Bob's done many great concerts in Milliken, but there was something special that had happened that night. And I said to Bob, "Bob, this has to be a live CD." And he said, "But it wasn't recorded."
Whoops.
And I said, "Well..." Actually, Jack Connors, the tech that evening, had sought out the opportunity to get the permission from Bob's manager to record it, but that communication never got to take place in time, and we were going on, and so he pushed the button. And of course, let's be clear. We don't intentionally do this, and we certainly would never do a recording and do anything with it without the permission of the musician, of course. But it was a situation. It's kind of a nice story, but it's a story with a happy ending, obviously. And as Bob, said. And Bob can speak to this, but halfway through the concert, he thought, "Wouldn't it be great if this was being recorded?"
I definitely felt it that night, and I very often don't. Most often don't. I'm most often glad that my mistakes were committed to history, and maybe even to the point of paranoia about it. And I don't think I should have that kind of paranoia. I think we should be able to have enough confidence in what we do that if the audience liked it, some other people might like it who weren't able to be there in that audience that night. And I guess I've just thought too much in that way of knowing that the live audience only hears it one time. But if you buy a CD and there's a clam on there, for those of you who don't know what clams are, that's our version of what we call mistakes. But if there's this obvious mistake on there, after you've heard it 10 times, actually we hope people listen to our CD 10 times, but on that 10th time...
You notice.
Yep, you got to own up to the fact that it's there, unless Jack Connors, our really great engineer and good Pro Tools editor, fixes the mistake. And I will humbly admit that there were a few little things, not many, but there were a few things that we cleaned up because I didn't want the real blatant, obvious ones to go out there to the public.
But the other side of the coin is that not knowing it was being recorded, Bob, I think, played with a freedom that he might not have if he had known it was being recorded.
Absolutely, Gene. I admit to that, too. It just changes your mindset. You can't help it. It's in your mind if it's a live recording, and I notice it even more so with video. We've been doing a lot of concerts over in Europe, and they have spectacular video capabilities now, even certainly in the pop world, but even in the jazz world. I'll look and see these cranes of cameras all over the place, and suddenly they're zooming in about 6 inches from my fingers. And you have to get into a mindset where you can keep from freezing up totally when if you start thinking, wow, some piano student 6 months from now is going to see that I played a B flat instead of a B natural there, and they'll see the finger going down on the black key rather than the white key or whatever. So it can be very intimidating and inhibiting is what I guess Gene was getting at. And that night I wasn't inhibited because I didn't know what was happening.
I know what you're talking about, too. People might not, I think people sometimes hear this kind of thing and go like, oh, yeah, that's just the thing that they say. But even if we were doing this interview in a taped environment rather than a live environment, it would be different for me. And I don't think that I would be as focused. I don't think that I would, I don't think it would be, as good, from my perspective. I do this better live than I do it taped. And it is something about, having to stand up and deliver and, not record something, then play it and have the opportunity to edit it and play it later. Sure. That makes this different. And I'm sure it's from a performance standpoint, knowing that whatever you do is going to be here now and then gone gives you a very different feel on stage than it does if you know you're committing whatever you do to posterity.
Absolutely. I love taking risks. And I love the audience to know that I'm taking a risk, even to the point where I will send signals with a phrase that I'm playing that has a certain repetitive obligation for the next phrase to follow it in a logical kind of way. And I'll set myself up for failure. And very often I do fail at that because it's going to become more obvious to the audience that I'm doing a wheel that might be a 4 times thing, and then a phrase, and on a different key, and then higher, and then higher. And on that 4th time, the audience knows very much what that phrase is because they heard the first 3 times. Well, what's he going to do on the 4th time? And you can either play games with them by just deliberately changing it on the 4th time so that when you arrive at that 10th note of the 4th repetition, you suddenly change it, and maybe you even look at them, look out with a little look on your face. Oh, you thought I was going to play a G there, Well, so there's definitely that kind of dialogue that goes on, and an internal mindset that goes on with me where I like challenging myself to do this thing that I don't even think I can make it to that 4th time without the 4th time kind of messing up a little bit, and I hope that the audience senses that danger and respects me for trying to do it rather than play safe, rather than play something that you've practiced for 8 hours a day and you can do it perfectly. I believe a jazz audience is smart enough to know when a jazz soloist is being too safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's the difference between film and theater. When you go to theater and see people taking risks in front of you, you get a thrill that you don't get watching a movie. It's a different experience. You Absolutely. Sort of participate in that risk in a way, and it's the same with spontaneous music.
Yeah, but I've always struggled with the live recording aspect of that, and I still do, even with our record that we're talking about today, because it's a completely different experience now. Yes, we hope to convey on a live CD some of that danger, but again, like I was mentioning before, on the second listening or the third listening or the 10th listening, it's going to be the same every time on the live CD. And then the listener does have the benefit of checking you out to see how perfect you were or how imperfect you were or whatever.
No, I think you always have to pay. You have to pay respects. You have to have regard for context, like how you context the people listening. If they're there in the room with you, that's a very different context than me playing this on the radio and somebody being at home listening to it. And you have to have respect for that.
Yeah, and I have to let go is another aspect of it that I had to deal with. Once Gene said, we've got this and it should be a live CD, then my next thought process is, first I want to listen to it and see if all of that spontaneous excitement that we were feeling, see if that translates into a recording or not, because I still would have had the opportunity to back out or to say no after listening.
How did you feel? Like, I know that you felt really good coming out of that show.
Yeah,
and then
I did.
How about on first listen?
Mixed.
Yeah,
because and I'm being 1,000% candid. I'm improvising this just the way I did at the concert, so I don't know whether I'm supposed to say that or not when I want people to buy this CD. But I felt my critical side start to kick in. So all of the wrong things are happening, which are inevitable when I'm listening in a critical kind of way. It's not the same vibe at all as when you're entering into the spirit of a live situation in a concert. And so I start to think, oh, why do we do this? And I start to remember that on this tune that we hadn't rehearsed, we went to the wrong section, we had to cover it, and blah, 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 blah. And I started thinking about what we might have to do to clean a little bit of that up. But it didn't take long for me to realize that I had a great possibility of having a live CD that I haven't had in many, many, many years, maybe 30 years. I have no live CDs of my own music that are available as Bob James Live. The last time was a double set called All Around the Town that I did in several different venues in New York City.
That's kind of odd for somebody. I think that somebody who has recording contracts, and it seems as if everybody else is putting one out every 6 or 7 years or so, just to cover the current repertoire. How come?
Maybe partially because of this same thing I'm talking about, a paranoia about it. There was nothing really deliberate, but I guess maybe I wasn't that much of a fan of, I wasn't inspired to want to I was much more interested in thinking of new material, going in the studio to create something new. And one thing did not lead to another to give me the opportunity of having more live recordings. And I wouldn't have even been thinking about doing this one. It just happened.
I remember talking to you before you went into this show, and it seemed as if the group was still a little bit in flux. You didn't say that, but I mean, just talking to you, it seemed as if there were still some moving parts in there that you weren't totally certain how they were going to go together.
With this band?
Yes.
But yes, absolutely, because there's a element of charisma that you hope will happen with everybody feeling the same thing, and you never know that until you get on the firing line. And it was a one-off also, which is not the ideal way. I think if you were going to plan, certainly if we were going to plan a live CD, we would have probably planned to go on the road and do at least a half a dozen concerts before we reached the point where we would be recording live. And I know a lot of people talk about doing the long club date where they play the same club for 2 weeks or something like that and record every night. And then you have the real luxury of having best of on one particular night. Jody Grind was exactly the magic tempo, blah, 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 all those things. So in this situation, we only had one shot at it. And even without the live CD, we only had one shot at doing a good concert. I wasn't coming in to Traverse City with a band that I'd been out on tour with for 6 months or whatever.
How did you bring this together? I mean, what did you tell the guys? You get them all together, you're coming in from the airport. What did you tell them you were aiming for?
Not much. We don't. I don't think I talk about that aspect very much. I remember arriving at the idea of wanting to do just a straightforward jazz set of my own music when talking to Gene Gentleman, and he has always been so supportive of me doing something different, and I had a feeling of wanting to not wear out my audience in Traverse City where my family and friends were, so I definitely did not want to have a history of playing the same show every time I came to town. So I've tried a whole bunch of different things, Chinese music with the Angels of Shanghai, and my daughter Hillary singing, something different every year. I even had a concert where I had 2 pianos on stage, but only one of me, and my other piano was a ghost, and some stuff like that. But I think that it occurred to me that I hadn't really done just a straightforward jazz night of my own music, trying to put together an all-star band of my favorite musicians. And that's what I set out to do with this night.
How did this relationship with the Milliken develop? Is this out of your? I know you're interested in visual arts as well, and
maybe Gene knows my history about that. I don't remember our first concert exactly.
Don't talk to me about memory anymore. I mean, I think probably the first one was with you and Hillary.
Could have been the first. It was one of the first.
It was one of the early concerts that you did. But certainly, as you said, you've always brought something new and unique to the Milliken stage each time that you've been on that stage. And that's been, of course, wonderful for the museum and for the hall, but and also I think for the Traverse City audience to have that experience and to see different sides of you in the process. And as we've talked about this production for that's coming up this weekend, just listening to you and Jeff talk about your history, people are going to be in for a real treat. This is going to be a very special opportunity to get to know this man that you all think you know, and it really be surprised and admire this guy's career and the fact that he's such a down-to-earth, easy person to work with. I've always respected that and appreciated that about Bob throughout all the years, because this is an international star in the world of jazz music and is internationally respected, and for him to dedicate himself as he has to doing something on a regular basis in Traverse City, I think is something we all really appreciate.
Yeah. And also your range of interests is really incredible. You talked about all the things that you've done at the Milliken, and none of it was really a reach. Like all that stuff you seem to have a passion for. And I remember when you did that film at the State after the earthquake and tsunami there, and you had connected with folks whose, I guess the entire town was kind of decimated.
Orfanato. Yeah, that's an aspect of music that I am so proud and happy that having made music my life, music gives you the opportunity to be in a extremely wide variety of circumstances. And if you stay open, which I have tried to do over a long time, great unpredictable things can come out of it, and certainly a variety of things come out of it. I will share with you a short thing that my wife has always been my best advisor, and there was a time when I felt moving to New York that I should specialize more and concentrate on one thing, because I saw that the guys who were totally being an arranger or totally just focusing on the piano and practicing the piano or whatever, that specializing was something that I should focus more on, and that maybe I was watering myself down, being a jack of all trades. And my wife, who knew me extremely well by that time, myself, and that was part of my makeup. To be eclectic or fickle or whatever term that you want to use about it. Maybe I've just never been able to make my mind up, but I've had tremendous variety of fun experiences that I believe that if I'd specialized too much, I would have missed out on a lot of things.
I think certainly we would have missed out on a lot of things.
Well, thank you for thinking that way.
We're here with Bob James, and this is WNMC in Traverse City. My name's Eric. Going to be imposing on Ralph a little bit here. Apologies, Ralph. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on Saturday. And I think that you guys are probably going to be touching on a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about very briefly here. And I think that, tell us a little bit, what is the structure of the evening going to be?
Well, we're going to have a nice informal stage setup. We're going to have an open and intimate and up-close and personal conversation with a person who I've characterized whenever anyone asks, oh, Bob James lives in Traverse City, what's he like? My description is always, he's one of the most open-minded, adventurous, and down-to-earth people I've ever known in the business. So a lot of what we'll talk about, is, as Gene mentioned, is Bob's rich history, which many people are not aware of because it's like pulling teeth getting this guy to talk about himself, you know?
Well, so you've set yourself a challenge.
Indeed, we have. So we're gonna talk a bit about Bob's early beginnings in Marshall, Missouri, and his piano competitions for the Missouri State Fair, that many of which he won, and which took place next to the bovine barns at the state fair.
So this is when you were a very young person, I should think. Okay.
Yes.
And we'll talk about his association with the University of Michigan, with Quincy Jones, with Maynard Ferguson, with Sarah Vaughan, with Creed Taylor from CTI, and lots of. We're going to keep it like as always the case with the New Jazz Archive, my radio show on IPR. We're going to gear it toward a general audience. It's not about the technical aspects of the music. It's about the mensch that this person is, and what he's done for, how he's connected, and how he's passionate about not only our community but the greater community. I think it's going to be a lot of fun for all concerned. Everyone in the room is going to enjoy themselves, and we do have some musical surprises planned, including some family music, and some music with one of the bandmates of Bob's on this CD. And by the way, Bob, I too listen with a very critical ear, and I was totally geeked when I heard this CD. I mean, I've transcribed your solo on the blues and Nautilus. And
well, believe it or not, Jeff, your reputation also precedes you as being a fantastic jazz pianist. And Jeff is the kind of guy that if you were going to be nervous, you don't really want to have him in the audience, because if you make a mistake, Jeff is going to absolutely know every one of them. So, I mean, I knew I was going to be scrutinized, and even more so once we got involved in doing this show, that we'd end up talking about it. But I don't know how you feel. The comments that I like the least is, oh, Bob, it doesn't make any difference if you make a mistake. Nobody's going to know that anyway. Well, I don't buy that, first of all, at all. And even if there was only the one person, even if there was only Jeff Haas in the audience that was going to know that you went to the wrong place, or you skipped a beat, or you played that tune at the wrong tempo, or whatever it is, I'm always trying to play to that person who is the most knowledgeable, and even if I'd let them down, I'm trying to aim for pleasing them.
I think the audiences too. They may not know that you played the wrong note. They may not know that there's something missing from that. But from the big picture standpoint, they can. Hey, something just happened there.
Exactly. Yes.
And sometimes you just like, wow, that was weird, and then it sort of rolls on, and you develop that weird thing that just happened.
But it's nice to, if there's that really, really knowledgeable person or the person you really care about, it is nice in a way to not know they're there. In the same way, it's nice to not know that that it's being recorded. Mm-hmm. I had a time in New York where I found out after the fact that Joe Sample was in the audience listening to me, and Joe is one of the jazz pianists that I've admired the most over many, many years, and he also had the reputation of being very caustic and letting you know when he thought it was terrible or whatever else. He was very, very candid about that kind of stuff. And he was complimentary, thankfully, at the end of my show, and we hung out in the dressing room afterwards, and he had a really good time. But had I known that Joe was in the audience, I think I would have played a lousy performance. I would have been so nervous.
How do you feel coming into this? This must be a little bit different for you. Having interviewed you a few times, I know that that you are candid with you're candid with me, and you share, but you always seem to have a little bit of reserve. That you seem to you don't like talking about yourself all that much.
Probably not. And I probably will be more nervous about this than I would be if I was just playing the keys all night long. But I feel very good about doing it for fundamental reasons. One is I'm very proud of the live CD, and I'm proud of my long history with Gene Gentleman. And you couldn't ask for a better host than Jeff Haas. He and I know each other pretty well, and he's already given me the indication that he's done his homework, and he'll be asking me questions about myself that I don't even know what they're going to be.
Well, that's always good. I think that you want, I guess you want a structure, and I guess you have one, but you also want a bit of spontaneity in a conversation as well, and it should be fun. And I think that when you were running off that litany, I was just like checking off boxes of stuff that I don't know about. There's and I regard myself as fairly knowledgeable about the music, and you've been involved in so many things that I've missed a fair number. And so even for folks that have been followers of yours, I'm sure that they're going to find out some new things about you, new things that you've been involved in.
An example of that for me was that when I started to mention to you that I hadn't had a live CD since All Around the Town in the 1970s, my head started spinning immediately. Maybe I forgot one, or maybe because there have been live performances of the Foreplay group that were videos or something, but an actual live CD, I'm going to go back home today to
go through the archive
and see if I said the right thing or not. I'm not sure.
So this is all going to be Saturday. Starts at 7:30. So how long do you anticipate it'll go on?
We're looking at about a 90-minute presentation, followed by a reception, a meet and greet reception in the sculpture court of the museum.
Okay.
Tickets are available, and mynorth.com is having a little bit of a challenge with their new system. So if you have any problems getting tickets through the website, go to the museum and call either the box office at 231-995-1553, or you can call the main desk, 995-1055. I'm really looking forward to it. I've loved this man and his music for years. I, in fact, produced your first show at Milliken way back when. And I want to say, and I'm not sure whether I have my dates right on this, Gene, I want to say that you were invited up to sit in with Alexander Zonchek before the Hillary concert.
That very well could be. I think I did that several times at Alex's concerts.
And he, credits you for an early rise in his career when he was, I guess he was playing up here with some regularity, and you sat in with him way back in the Union Street days.
I did, and before that, I went in to hear him play at Baker's Keyboard Lounge in Detroit. And I needed a flute player because I had just finished an album that had featured Hubert Laws, and I wanted to use flute on tour, and I loved the way Alex played, and I was getting ready to look for somebody to hire. So immediately after hearing him for the first time, within a week or two, he was out on tour with me.
What an opportunity.
Bob, this is, I guess, the focus of this is the new live CD, although you guys are going to be talking about a lot of other things.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of a CD release party as well. And this thing really did well here. I mean, I think a lot of people saw, the local connection, and were like, "Oh, okay, it's a live CD recorded here." And it was amazing how quickly everybody, just started taking it very seriously as a part of the jazz rotation. Like, wow, this is really good stuff.
I'm very glad to hear that.
And so it's I wanted to congratulate you on this is a really great offering. And folks, if you don't have it yet, well, hey, this is a great evening. Pick up the CD and get it signed. And like I say, you will not be disappointed. This is a great CD, live at the Milliken Auditorium from Bob James. And who are your cohorts on this?
Clarence Penn is on drums, Nate Phillips is on bass, and Perry Hughes is on guitar.
And I wanted to ride out here with another tune from the CD. So what should we do?
Oh, before we do that, before you choose, Bob,
okay,
I wanted to make mention that Clarence Penn will be on stage with us as well on Saturday.
Oh, cool. Super.
For one
I
of
was going to say that
surprises.
before, but I wasn't sure whether you wanted to keep it as a surprise or not. But Clarence is an alumni of the Interlochen Arts Academy, so he's coming back to town. Clarence lives in New York, and he's coming back to do something at Interlochen. The timing was perfect, so we had to invite him to come up and be part of this and to talk a little bit about what his experience was doing this live CD.
Oh, that'd be cool. That'd be great to get another sort of facet of the story. And that is all on Saturday, starting at 7:30. And tickets, 995-1553. And is the Dennis Museum ordering system the same as My North, or do you have a...
Yes, it's all online. If you go to dennismuseum.org, it will take you to My North to buy tickets. As I say, they've instituted a new system, so there have been a few challenges. So if you have any issues, just call the box office directly, 995-1553, and it will get you to a real person who will sell you a ticket. And this is going to be a memorable evening. We hope everybody will come out and support it. Proceeds from the CD and this stage go directly to benefit the museum. So we encourage everyone to pick up the CD. You will not be disappointed. I listened to it 5 times driving back and forth to Kalamazoo, and it got better every time. It's a wonderful CD.
So what do you think we should play, Bob?
Why don't we just play the opening of Blues Down Under?
Alrighty.
Give them a vibe about how the concert started.
Is this this is just a little improvisatory piece that you guys worked up?
I thought it was, actually, because Perry Hughes started playing it in rehearsal, and he couldn't even remember what it was. Well, he was just playing, but he's really good friends and plays a lot with Bobby Lyle, another great pianist from Texas. And after Perry had a chance to think about it, he remembered that Bobby Lyle had played it with him, and we had to track down the history of it to find out even the name of it. We didn't even know what it was at the time we played it in the concert. And as soon as I realized it was going to be a live CD, I thought, well, we got to do something about the publishing information and all that. So it's a blues called Blues Down Under by Bobby Lyle.
And all those songs that just fall under your fingers like that, I think that those are always some of the best.
I think so too, and I just felt so good about the other two guys hearing Perry for the first time in rehearsal, and Perry just started playing, and there's a magic about the way he plays that immediately sets an atmosphere. And so it was very much at the last minute that I thought, gee, let's bring the audience at the live concert into this feeling that we were having and start the concert that way. Sometimes you think you're going to start a concert with a big, loud, brash, wake people up kind of a thing, but this was a much, much more low-key piece, and I think it set the mood for the entire evening.
So this is the opener from Bob James live at the Milliken Auditorium. He will be live doing some music, doing an interview and taping for the IPR show, the New Jazz Archive, which is not just an IPR show, IPR produced, but syndicated in a number of different venues across the country. So Jeff and Bob are going to be recording that for an episode of the New Jazz Archive upcoming. So how long will it take to actually get this into the can?
Probably, we're working a couple of months in advance, so by the time this is produced and into the rotation, it'll probably be the fall.
Okay.
But
So
we'll let you know.
But hey, don't wait for that. Saturday at 7:30
Be a
at
part
the
of
Milliken Auditorium. 995-1553 for tickets. And here we go. Blues Down Under. Thank you, Bob. Gene.
Thank you, Eric.
Jeff.